started.
Yesterday. I left it on my desk, you said.
Let's get the meeting started here. I'd like to start off with our lawyer, Brian. You're on.
I think I'll take this with this one.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I am. We'll go ahead and get started on our remote meeting procedures. So welcome, everybody. This is Brian Yates with Schwartz, Page and Harding. Welcome to the Woodlands Water Mud Number 1 Board of Directors meeting for Tuesday, July the 20th, 2021. I appreciate everyone being able to attend our last remote meeting today. So as in prior meetings, I'll briefly go through our remote meeting procedures and then we'll perform a roll call. So to begin with, I need to remind everyone the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Second, please remember to state your name before you speak, include the making of any motions. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Third, we will continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting by telephone today or remotely today so that we can accurately reflect the attendance in the minutes of the meeting. I'll perform a roll call for the board members, followed by staff and consultants. When you hear your name and your company called, please respond by indicating that you're present in the meeting. Likewise, if you need to leave the meeting before it adjourns, please announce that you're doing so before you disconnect. Once I've completed the roll call for directors, staff, and consultants, I'll ask for any members of the public to identify themselves for the record. So starting with the roll call for our board of directors, Bob Lilac.
Present.
Walt Leszewski. Walt, are you in the meeting?
Present.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Ken Dorland. Ken, are you in the meeting? Okay, I do not hear Ken, so I'll mark him as absent. Jeff Long.
I am mostly here today, yes.
Thank you, Jeff. Harley McIntosh.
Present.
All right, that completes the roll call for our directors. We do have a quorum present. So we will move on to the roll call for Woodlands Water staff. Jim Stinson.
Present.
Mike Mooney.
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois.
Present.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy.
I'm here.
Jeannie Scott.
She's here.
Is
here.
okay.
I'm here.
Anyone? Okay, thank you, Jeannie. Anyone else from Woodlands Water in the meeting? If not, we will move on to Sandra Center River Authority staff. Ron Kelling.
Present.
Ed Shackelford.
Present.
Chris Meeks.
Present?
Anyone else from the River Authority in the meeting this morning?
No, sir.
Okay, we will move on to Mud 1 consultants. Do we have any Mud 1 consultants in the meeting this morning? If there are none, we'll move on to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public present in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record as well.
Dan Kokarst with Howard Hughes Corporation is on the line today, representing the developer.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Any other members of the public present in the meeting? If not, Maureen, does that cover everyone who appears to be logged in this morning?
That's everyone.
All right, that will complete our roll call. I'll hand it back over to Bob to begin the agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Dan, welcome. You're the only member of the public. You have anything to say?
I do not have anything to add to your meeting as far as anything regarding development right now, but glad to be here. Thank you for your service, and I'll just listen. I'll go ahead and announce right now that I have a back-end constraint at 8:30. At 9 o'clock. So I'll be leaving the meeting in about 20 minutes. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan, for attending. Okay, moving on to item perpetual item number 3. update on Falling Star Court. Mike, do you have anything new?
Yeah, a little bit. I can't think of their last name now. Billings have provided us a new lien holder, and I think Brian is going to run a new title report and a new lien holder consent for the easement. I just don't know where that's at yet. Brian might could fill you in on the rest.
This is Brian. That's correct, Mike. We have provided that information to the title company. As you can imagine, right now with the real estate market, they're a little bit backed up. So we are waiting to hear back from them to confirm that the lien holder information that we have is accurate and can provide us the recording information for that new lien that we need to put in the lien holder consent to get that back over to the landowner. So hopefully we'll have that wrapped up and over to them here in the next week or so, would be my hope.
I was beginning to wonder if we should move that to the consent agenda because it keeps coming up every month.
Yeah, this is Brian. There's really nothing actually for y'all, no action items. Y'all already approved the easement that they need to convey, subject to them getting the necessary signatures. So this is really just a status item. We don't have to keep it on the agenda if y'all don't want to, but there's no action for y'all to be considering right now. You've already taken months ago the action you need to take.
Okay, then Shelley, let's delete that from next month's agenda. And any work that's being done can be included in the general manager's report. Moving on to item 4, do we have any requests for adjustments? Mike or Jeannie?
This is Mike. Nothing this month.
This is Jeannie. I don't have anything either.
Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. I have only one question on the financial report. The water service repair, the year-to-date activity is about $75,000 greater than the $23,600 budget. Is this mostly due to Tacus contractors busting pipes?
This is Mike. Yes, this is directly related to their work. We have received a bit of a payment from them, of almost $35,000. One of their 5 major general subcontractors. They've either parted ways or gotten rid of them some way. And their portion was, this contractor's portion was 34 and some change, and we did get a check from Tacus for that amount, believe it or not. So we're chipping away at it.
Okay, so the total billings for damage by the subcontractors is around 75,000. Is that correct?
No, the total billings for the contractors is about $303,000,
Okay.
of which we've received only about 35 thus far.
Great. Okay, that's good news. So anybody else have any comments on the consent agenda or questions?
Hearing none, this is Jeff Long. I move for approval of the consent calendar.
Okay, do we have a second?
This is Walt, I'll second.
Any further discussion? Brian, call the vote.
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion on the consent agenda, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Aye.
Ken? Absent? Jeff?
Yes.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Moving on to item 10, we need to adopt a resolution casting votes for the MCAD special district. And I make the motion that we approve I'm having a mental blank here.
Arthur.
Arthur?
Yeah, Arthur Bredehoff as our candidate.
I'll second that.
Do we have any discussion? If not, Brian?
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Aye.
Jeff?
Hey,
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Moving on, item 11, SJRA report. Chris?
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. Nothing out of the ordinary in the monthly operations report. You will notice, I guess the one thing that is out of the ordinary that I think about it is with the amount of rainfall that we've had so far during the summer and the weather temperature being low, you'll notice that water demands are down, which also means that revenues are down as well. So in your packet, due to the May cutoff, we weren't able to get the May financials. So you'll see the May and June financials that reflects the loss in revenue basically due to the reduced demands. If you have any questions on that or anything else, there's enough of us here to answer them.
Yeah, I did notice that last month we were using a 50-50 blend. And this year, or this month, or for the month of June, it's gone back up to a much higher percentage of groundwater versus surface water. What's the plan for the remaining of the year?
So, and I'll try to keep it high level without confusing everybody, including myself with this. The budget is based off of a 65-35% blend, 65% groundwater. Our Lone Star permit is based off of basically a 50-50 blend. And so what we've done and what the plan going forward is, if the weather would cooperate, is we used a lot more surface water in the winter time, and we plan to use more groundwater in the summertime. And so what you'll notice is as you go back through the monthly reports, you'll see that during September, October, November into probably February, you'll see where surface water was a lot higher, groundwater was low. In the summertime, if demands come back up, we're going to use more groundwater and less surface water to try to hit that 65%, 35% blend.
Well, my only concern is, we're taking a hard nose against Lone Star and in their DFC. And I was the only attendee at the meeting last week. And the president of the Lone Star told me that if SJRA and the Woodlands is serious about reducing subsidence, that they should use more surface water. And I can't disagree with him on that statement. So I think we're kind of talking out of one side of our mouth when we want to cut back on DFCs when we're not taking advantage of using more surface water. I mean, I recognize it costs more to utilize it. And SJRA is caught between a rock and a hard place financially to do this. But I would sure like to see us start using more surface water.
Well, right now, the GRP review committee has set all GRP participants that receive surface water on 65% groundwater, 35% surface water, just to keep it all unanimous across the board. I know that is an item that has been discussed and will likely be discussed further in the future as well, as to what the blend ratio will be going forward.
This is Director McIntosh. I think we got to understand that this isn't just the Woodlands. This is all the participants in the surface water initiative, and they have to do it so everybody comes out using 30%. Okay, and we can't talk just about the Woodlands because it isn't just the Woodlands.
And I'd like to just offer my comment on that too. I know that we saw subsidence and fault movement decline substantially back when this region, meaning the Woodlands, Oak Ridge, and Southern Montgomery County mud were all on a higher blend of surface water. But I would offer that if it's only the Woodlands that agrees to take that 50-50 or higher blend of surface water and nobody else does around us, that any benefits we might see would be short-lived as the rest of the community increases groundwater withdrawal. I mean, it just stands to reason that water should be managed not on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis, but on at least a more regional basis. And I just think that the Woodlands, it certainly sends a positive message that we're doing something that we think is right, but we have got to get others to follow that line of thought. And Lone Star needs to manage groundwater on a regional basis rather than a community or neighborhood basis.
And I couldn't agree with that anymore. But companies like Quadvest, they're not connected to surface water, and they have no way of using surface water unless a line were built to connect to them. But it's my understanding that the Woodlands is by far the biggest user of water among the 70 people who are in the GRP agreement. Is that correct? Ron or Chris or Ed?
Yes, it is. That's correct.
Of the water that's consumed, do you have any idea what percentage is from the Woodlands versus the other 69 or 70 GRP participants?
I know the Woodlands is at least 25% and maybe closer to 35%. Is that Chris?
That sounds about right. I haven't checked it in a while, but I believe that was right what we looked at the last time.
And Quadvest is about half of what the Woodlands uses, all of Quadvest companies.
Okay, so of all the water that SJRA puts out, combined surface and groundwater, only 35%, 25 to 35% goes to the Woodlands?
No, total water demand in the county. Yeah. Total water demand in the county is about 25% Woodlands. I'm looking it up now.
Okay, so that's county-wise.
Yep.
Right.
Bob,
not surface water.
Not surface, yeah. Bob, while he's looking that up, my thoughts on this are it would be admirable for us and our citizens to be willing to go to a higher surface water level on a continuing basis. However, there is a cost associated with using the surface water versus groundwater. If the participants in the entire county were willing to support us in the sense of doing that some way, where our citizens are not punished for doing the right thing. I'm not sure how we get there because Quadvest can pump and sell water cheaper. They're more, I mean, it's a business advantage to them, obviously. But if there was some way to level the playing field and we have the ability to use more surface water, then that would be great. I'm all for that. I think it's the correct way to do this in the sense of the subsidence. But if we can level the playing field, absolutely. We should go to 50, 60, 70% if we can. And for those entities that can't tie into the surface water, they have a surcharge or they have something that helps offset those costs. Then let's do everything we can to minimize the subsidence.
In calendar year 2020, total water demand, looking at all of Montgomery County of our GRP participants. The Woodlands was 26%. And Conroe, as a reference point, was 19.9%.
When the surface water plant was built, what was the proposed intent? The design, was it designed for a 65% surface?
Yes.
35%?
Yes.
Why did we depart from that design standard?
The overall cry from our participants to reduce rates. That's the only reason.
So because of that, then the plant is overbuilt. And we're.
Well, this is Mike. We did have a trihalomethane issue too, if you remember.
It's underutilized.
Yes. Underutilized or overbuilt, pretty much the same thing. Well, I just think it handicaps our argument with Lone Star and GMA 14 to hold steady on the DFC and not increase the DFC. So I can't disagree with the statement that Harry Hardman made at the meeting. If the Woodlands is serious about subsidence, it has the power to do more to reduce subsidence in the Woodlands. I'll just make that comment.
Just as a reference point, the Woodlands in 2020 utilized 56% of all surface water produced by the plant. Which stands to reason because you're the largest single water user in our GRP participants.
Well, this is Mike. The same people that are saying the Woodlands can reduce subsidence by taking more surface water are the people that are saying there's not enough data in the north end to even show we have subsidence. We need more reference points. You know, so that they've just refused to acknowledge it.
And that's an argument that I made in a statement. I did submit the GMA 14 yesterday, is that we need to have more measuring and even as you say, the San Jacinto or the groundwater conservation district is shooting from the hip when they want the higher DFC. So, well, we'll see where it goes. Yesterday was the deadline for comments. And I sent in a statement, and also Township Future sent in a resolution with 453 signatures on it. Now,
Bob, this is
Okay.
Ed Shackelford. I think Lone Star extended their deadline. That was mentioned in the GRP review committee meeting yesterday.
Oh, okay.
And I'm looking for that. I think it was extended to
Friday. Friday.
Friday.
5 p.m.
Okay, I was not aware of that. Okay, so that would be the 24th, is that correct?
23rd at 5 p.m.
23rd is, I guess it's Thursday.
Okay,
It's the 23rd.
okay, all right. Thanks for that information. Okay, I've said enough. Let's move on to item 12, the SJRA budget. Does anybody want to comment on that? Ed, you want to comment on it? It's going to be your baby here.
Well, Chris is also on the call to basically ask if there are any questions in anticipation of you all voting next month to approve the budget.
Yeah, I do notice that it's a 5.6% increase over the previous year. You want to highlight the principal areas of, is it due to increased water volume that will be producing, or?
Sure, this is Chris Meeks. There's three main areas, if memory serves, that actually do, well, there's two main areas, and I'll kind of break them down. One is staffing. So the FTE, full-time equivalent increase is 1.3. What that comes from, and Jim can send out a breakout that we did for another MUD just to kind of show where the increases were, but that is one of the increases. The second item is going to be maintenance related. And so it's in two parts. The first is that the transfer into the R&R fund for the large projects increased by $500,000. That's an item that we've been talking about for a number of years with the aging infrastructure and the need for more funding for some of these larger projects and the more of the projects. That has increased 500,000. Excuse me. The last item related to maintenance is just in the general O&M of stuff like clarifiers, filter rehab, so on and so forth. Filters increased alone by about 120,000. That's because the media that's on it, it basically looks like carpet. It lasts for 6 to 7 years and it's at its lifespan. So it needs to be replaced. So three main areas highlighted is staffing increase by 1.3 FTEs, transfer to R&R by 500,000, and then general maintenance in the actual budget by, I believe it's another 500,000.
Okay, thank you. Any further comment?
And then I think it's important to also point out there was no increase last year in water or wastewater.
Last year, let me double check. Last year there was an increase. I'll just, I was going back real quick.
The year before.
That's what it was. In FY 18 and 19, there were no rate increases. And so this is, as some directors have said, this is a little bit of playing catch up from 2 years of delayed projects and no rate increases.
Okay. So the the agenda says consider an act on the budget. That's my understanding. We are going to vote on this next month and not this month. Is that correct?
The trustee, this is Chris Meeks. The trustees will vote in August, but this item is for MUD 1 to direct their trustee on how to vote at the August trustees meeting.
Okay. Would anybody like to make the motion to approve the budget as submitted?
I'll make the motion. Budgets are never popular to vote on, so I move that we approve the budget as submitted.
Director McIntosh, second.
Any further discussion on the motion to approve the budget, proposed budget? If not, Brian, call the vote.
This is Brian. If there's no further questions or discussion, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Bartley?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 13. The Trinity River Authority Water Supply Agreement. Brian, do you want to comment on that?
This is Brian. I believe Ed is covering that with the boards today.
Okay. Ed?
Good morning. This is Ed Shackelford. I'm going to try and share my screen on the PowerPoint that we presented to you all in May. Did that come up?
Yes.
All right. So it's not showing on my screen. So, so we talked to you all in May about the Trinity River water supply option that SGRA has currently. And the issue for needing to discuss this gets down to Montgomery County needs additional water long-term. The county is growing, as you all are aware, just by the number of homes that are continuing to be built in Montgomery County. The river authorities do long-range planning for water supplies because somebody needs to. And we, SGRA, acquired a 50,000 acre foot Trinity River water supply option back in 2013. This next slide gives you projections on water demand. And if you'll look at 2020 under the municipal category, and that's the category where most of the increase is occurring. You know, currently it's showing about 101,000 acre feet. Lake Conroe currently produces 100,000 acre feet, so it'd be very capable of meeting all of those supplies. But as you grow out to about 2050, the total water demand is just short of 200,000 acre feet. And if you go on the presumption that Lone Star at some point will focus on a number, and let's say it's 100,000 acre feet that is able to come out of the aquifers, then sometime after 2050, additional water supplies are needed, and that's where this Trinity River water supply option comes into play. You all have seen this graphic before where the water comes out of Lake Livingston and into the north end of Lake Conroe. Again, it's 50,000 acre feet per year firm yield water. If the water is transferred, ultimately pump stations and pipelines are necessary to move the water into Lake Conroe. So let's talk about what's occurring right now. We have the 50,000 acre feet per year. It was initiated by the GRP Review Committee. It's needed for future supplies sometime after 2050. We are currently paying $237,500 per year to retain this water supply option. And that is being paid through raw water and also the GRP. Now that's in there. Well, okay. So contract wise, by the end of this year, 2021, if we are to retain this water supply option, we've got to initiate a service area agreement with Trinity River Authority. We also would need to start an interbasin transfer permit, and that we're anticipating that could take several legislative sessions to be able to accomplish that. Our attorneys have estimated that cost somewhere between $1 to $2 million to do the interbasin transfer permit. And by April of 2028, we have to convert that service area agreement to a water supply contract for the 50,000 acre feet. And then it's a reservation and a per annual reservation fee of approximately $1.5 million that we spend to retain the right to move that water. Now, what does it cost you all? So look at the bottom part of that slide where it talks about the potential increase above the SGRA GRP rate based on ultimate use, and that's assuming a production of 30 million gallons. So the period of 2022 through 2027, it adds 10 cents to the monthly water bill of a typical user in the Woodlands. And then to pay the reservation fees, it's about 20 to 25 cents per thousand beginning in 2028 and going forward for a typical user in the Woodlands. And that's on a per month basis. So roughly a quarter per month, you're talking what, $12.50 a year? If my math is correct, for 12 months. So we've been out meeting with the various stakeholders. We met with the Metro Mud last night, and they voted to notify SRA to continue the water supply option contract. And so the discussion, ultimately, we've got to go to our board, and I know the PowerPoint says July or August. It's probably going to be September when we go to the SRA board and make a recommendation to them on how to proceed. When we visited this issue with the MUDs back in May, most of them, well, I would say all of them, were verbally supportive of retaining the water supply option and retaining the ability to plan for water supplies beyond 2050. And so I'm available. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Bob, this is Jeff. I want to start with a couple. This may lead to some other questions. First, on your chart, number 3 there, I think you've shown it again. It makes some assumptions for water use out into 2050 and 2060
Yes.
based on current growth patterns. Is there any thought or calculation into this for, let's say, not extreme water conservation, but fairly extensive water conservation that might be a cost avoidance kind of a situation for us? So have you calculated any future water conservation? It's like the toilets, we changed the toilet
Right.
years ago, and we've done some other things. There isn't, in my opinion, a whole lot of effort in the, let's say, landscape arena for water conservation. I know the township has done some things with their systems that have improved that considerably, but it hasn't maybe translated down to the residential homes necessarily. But first question is there any thought on these numbers that could be reduced significantly by water conservation?
I know in the Region H planning group, they do account for a certain amount of water conservation in their overall planning. It does not show on this slide. Jeff, I could not tell you what that number is without doing some research.
Okay, second question on this assumptions for cost sharing or cost. Were there others besides just the township who would be paying this additional cost? Yeah, that slide there.
Yes, sir.
Are there others besides us who would bear the cost of reserving this 50,000?
Yes, and I don't mean to cut you off.
Right.
This cost is shared across all the raw water customers of the SRA and also with all the GRP participants.
Okay.
So they would be paying for it. If they're not getting surface water, it would be built into their groundwater pumpage fee. And so the 80 participants of the GRP plus all the raw water customers would be helping pay for this.
Okay, so roughly 12 to 13 bucks a year for reserving this right. It goes from 237,000 currently to $1,000,004 in 28, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and it goes directly to the Trinity Water Authority? Is that
River Authority? Yes, sir.
River Authority? Okay, I'll wait to ask any other questions. Let everyone else speak.
Now, just in case this question's mulling around in someone's head, this 25 cents does not cover the construction costs of the pipelines, the pump stations to actually move the water at some future date.
Yeah, and that was probably, it looked like needed sometime in the 2040s. You would start.
Yes, and it'd be like the GRP program where it starts out a little bit to cover engineering, then starts out a little more to cover right-of-way acquisition, and then you get into your construction costs.
Sure, all that could be bonded at, I'm sure, some reasonable rate and spread over 30 years, but you haven't done those numbers yet.
No, sir.
This is Director McIntosh. As I recall, back when we were negotiating this whole thing, there was a thought that if we had a good cooperation with the city of Houston, we may be able to just do a trade-off on those rights with the city of Houston and not have to build that line all the way to Lake Conroe.
I know that was talked about at the trustee meeting a little bit last week. And we have not had any conversations with the city regarding that, regarding a trade.
Could I offer a little history on that?
Yes, please.
Back in 2008, 2009, we tried to trade our water that we have in the Trinity, some of our water in the Trinity with the city of Houston to actually own the 2/3 that they have in Lake Conroe. That got very complicated with elected officials and it never happened. And I don't see that happening ever. The city of Houston is in a mode where they're not interested in giving up any of their water rights. And I just remind everybody that we do have a contract for that 2/3 water in Lake Conroe. It was an 80-year contract and it should go another 70 years.
The contract.
The contract.
Doesn't the, this is Bob Langley, doesn't the water from Lake Livingston ultimately wind up going downstream to Houston?
Unless you can divert it, yes.
So we would divert it to Lake Conroe,
right,
and reduce the amount of water that goes down to Houston.
Right.
So,
that's why they want their hands on this TRA water.
And Bob, keep in mind that Houston owns 3/4 of Lake Livingston. Their water rights in that lake are 750,000 acre-feet per year. TRA owns the other 250. And so that's where the 50,000 is coming out of, is TRA's 250,000.
but it seems to me Jeff's comment make a lot of sense. They wouldn't lose any water rights if we made a trade-off between the two. Sounds kind of crazy to me. Maybe I'm uninformed.
This is Director McIntosh. If you remember back when we got the first moratorium agreement with the city of Houston, we were denied that request through 2 mayors, and we didn't get it until we got a mayor who was amenable and would work in our favor, and legislators also that were competent and not. Anyway, it's one of those things. It's a possibility, but you got to keep plowing the ground, and if you're lucky, you might get some action that's favorable.
Harley, this is Jeff. I agree with you. Yeah, we didn't see any way forward for many, many years. And then finally, we found an administration down there that was at least willing to discuss the options and had some legislative people who were able to put it together. And that's why you look so many years out, 30 years out to 2050, a lot of things can happen. And there may be a way to trade that. I don't see any loss to the city of Houston on the amount of water. It's equal. So there things could happen, Harley, between now and then that would not demand spending that capital cost to move the water to Conroe. That's an expensive proposition. I don't know which slide that was, but it was like $300 some $1 million, oh, here it is, 300 million, that wouldn't have to be spent by a very smart transfer of the 50,000 rights from Conroe. So I think that could happen, and we don't know what year. We just have to keep everyone aware of this issue and find some way to make that happen in the future, and it could happen. So I wouldn't spend that 300 million until the last minute, so to speak.
Yeah, this is Director McIntosh. We're back to item 13, and I make a motion that we approve the San Jacinto River Authority to continue the agreement to reserve the water rights of Trinity River.
I will, this is Director Lilac. I will second that.
And let me ask one question on the motion. I'm fine moving ahead. Is there any penalty if something positive does happen and we are able to withdraw from that agreement? Is there any penalties, or are we obligated for 30 years, or does it end when we pull out of it? That's a legal question.
Jeff, right now, I think it ends if we pull out.
Okay, so we don't have to continue to pay. That's
Correct.
fine. Okay, thank you.
The only concern I have is the $1.2 million to get a permit, and then the legal cost of $250,000 to prepare a contractual agreement. Those numbers seem kind of astounding to me. And the second thing is, where does that $237,000 reservation fee go to? Does it go into a pot for future capital expenditure, or does that go into the coffers of the TRA?
The $237,500 that we are currently paying annually goes to TRA because it's their water.
Yeah, but we're not, so all we're paying for is just a right, and we're not.
We're
so
paying
it's
for an option to perfect a contract.
So then technically it's a windfall to them. They have no offsetting expenses related to other than the cost of depositing the check.
That's right, Bob, but it goes to 1.4 million in 28.
Ed, why is the cost of a permit so high, 1 to 1.2 million?
Lawyers.
That's spoken well by an engineer.
It's going to take a lot of lawyers, a lot of time to get an interbasin transfer permit.
Okay, I will not ask Brian for any further comment on that. So. Okay.
Well, whatever he responds would not be part of that 2 million.
Okay, Brian, you want to call the vote?
Yes, sir. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, moving on to item 14. I applaud the SJRA for wanting to get involvement of the MUDs to participate in this plant consolidation study. And there are 3 people on MUD 1 who are interested, myself, Jeff Long, and Walt Liszczewski. And the only reason why I'm interested is I did these kind of studies for a career. I had a consulting company called Corporate Strategies, which focused on doing financial modeling and evaluation. Not in this area, however, it was just in a transportation area. So I'm not an expert in the water and wastewater treatment area, but in terms of financial modeling and evaluation, present value analysis, and so forth, that's my expertise. Jeff Long is a civil engineer and with a PE degree, and he has some familiarity working with wastewater plants in California. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, Oklahoma, California, Arkansas. But yeah, I'm willing to step aside. I think Bob's experience is very valuable. And I do know that Walt has had extensive experience that even probably surpasses mine, even though I think it's what I've done is good, but I think Walt has done a whole lot also. So I'm willing to support Bob or Walt, either one.
So Walt, you want to comment?
I'm willing to support Bob.
Well, you know, I'm willing to support both of you two guys.
Well, I'd make a motion that we appoint Bob to that.
I'll second
committee.
that.
Okay.
Ryan, call for the vote.
This is Brian. If there's no further discussion, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
I will abstain because we still have 3 people left to vote.
Okay, abstention by Bob. Walt?
I vote for Bob. Aye.
Jeff?
Yeah, I'll throw my support behind Bob. Yes.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Well, thanks, everyone. But in fact, I'm going to be looking to you two guys to work with me. And I'm really pleased to see this kind of interest in our mud. And I'll feel a whole lot more comfortable with you two behind me. So you can count on setting aside some time to work with me on that. So thanks, everyone.
I'll have to think about it. You said you're so qualified that we'll let you handle it then. So
Well, only in the modeling, not in the engineering side of it. So I'll be looking for, I'll definitely be bugging you all, especially since you voted for me. So
it'll cost you.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on to item 15, a DFC. Jim, do you have any comment?
I do not. Ron, have you got any information on that? You're muted, sir.
They have not identified any date other than October the 6th for their next meeting. And well, one other note, there has been discussion out there that
Statistics and charts and information.
well, one of the items that Lone Star is trying to get put into the DFC is that they get the option. It'd be not a 70% remaining drawdown and a subsidence metric of 1 foot average, but an and or. And if they get that simple and or put in there, then that would allow them to create rules and ignore the subsidence metric. So.
Why am I not surprised?
Yeah, I know.
Okay, well, I'm worn out from all the meetings I participated in and the statements I prepared, which are fallen on totally deaf ears. And the fact that I was the lone participant in person at the meeting last week, I did not make any friends there when I read my statement. And I will ask Shelley to put a copy of my statement up on Google Drive so people can download and look at it. or if it's okay, have her distribute it to everyone. I haven't done that yet. Anything more on item 15? Okay, Mr. Attorney, you have the stand on item 16.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Under the attorney's report, last week I reported at the trustees meeting and been reporting at meetings this month that the governor has officially announced that he will be lifting his disaster proclamation that suspended the in-person meeting requirements under the Texas Open Meetings Act effective as of September the 1st. So all political subdivisions that have not gone back to meeting in person by September the 1st will be required to do so at that time. So this will not have a functional impact on the Woodlands since y'all decided to go back in person beginning next month, but all other entities will be right behind you and starting to hold in-person meetings in September. The other item I've been reporting on is that we have completed our legislative summary from the 2021 session, and that is up for on the Google Drive for directors that are interested in taking a look at that. Overall, as I think we talked about in a couple of meetings since the session ended, it ended up being a fairly quiet session for special purpose districts, which is a good thing. No significant legislation passed that will have a negative impact on how districts conduct business. So all in all, it was a good session. Happy to answer any questions if y'all have them. Otherwise, I do need to cover items 17 and 18 with the board.
The only question I have is with the special session called for July and the Democrats all going to Washington, is there anything that was on the July special agenda that might affect us?
This is Brian. So one of the main items that they were looking to address in the special session, and there's a lot of politics being played, but I don't know that things are done just yet. They may call repeated special sessions until one side gives in. We'll see. But there was a big focus on elections and securing elections, and to the extent that there were any changes to existing law under the election code that was globally applicable to all political subdivisions, then they could have some impact on us and how our districts conduct elections, or how voters are qualified, or how they prove their eligibility to vote, et cetera. But those are more election mechanics. It wouldn't change anything else as far as how the districts conduct business that I'm aware.
Okay. Okay, if nothing further, Brian, you can continue with item 17.
Okay, item number 17, consider the adoption of a resolution concerning developed district status for 2021. You may recall we had to go through this exercise for the first time last year in connection with the passage of, I think it was Senate Bill 2 regarding rollback taxes. So historically, districts had an 8% rollback rate, meaning that a district could impose a maintenance tax that generated up to 8% more in tax revenue on the average resident homestead before they would be subject to a rollback election. And then if they exceeded that 8% threshold, then voters had to petition in a certain number in order to force a rollback election. In the 2019 session, one of the main focuses was on limiting the increase in the property tax burden for folks in the state. And the one of the pieces of legislation that passed modified the rollback calculation structure, and it provided a new metric to determine whether or not a district was now a developing district or a developed district. And the metric was, if a district has sufficient water and sewer infrastructure necessary to serve the projected 95% of projected ultimate development in the district, then a district was considered to be developed. If they didn't have that amount of infrastructure in place to serve 95% or more of ultimate developed, they were considered a developing district. If you're a developing district, you keep your 8% rollback rate, the requirement to petition, for voters to petition in order to force an election stayed in place. So it was pretty much status quo. If you're classified as a developed district, then you had a 3.5% rollback rate instead of the 8%. And if you exceeded that amount, then you were automatically subject to a rollback election. So we have prepared a spreadsheet for all of our district client engineers to complete, since they are the ones who are most familiar with district infrastructure, and confirm whether or not the district has that 95% amount of infrastructure in place or not. We did send that to LJA, but have not heard back from them on that. I'm going to confirm again this morning. Our paralegal reached out to LJA yesterday afternoon and did not hear back. So I'm going to follow up on that. I think the district was actually considered developing last year, not developed for whatever reason. I guess maybe some potential redevelopment, but I think y'all should be classified as a developed district. There's really not much left to be done in MUD 1. So if I can get confirmation on that before the meeting ends, then we can take action on item 17. Otherwise, we'll have to defer that until next month until we get that confirmation from LJA. So I think at this point, we'll just defer on that. And I'll see if I can get confirmation before the meeting ends.
Okay, yeah, I'm comfortable with deferring that. Anybody else have any comments? Okay, we will defer action on item 17 until August. Okay, 18, Brian.
This is Brian. So there has been a lot of discussion about consolidation with MUD 6. Bob, I don't know if you want to offer any opening remarks about discussions, committee level discussions between MUD 1 representatives and MUD 6 representatives before we just go through and consider the approval of the legal documents associated with that potential consolidation.
Well, I think everybody has read the material that the committee put together. It was far more extensive and detailed than what we did in MUD 2 and MUD 40. And I don't think there's any unique revelations that alter the decision or the vote that we need to make on it. There was one concern among a MUD 6 director that back in 2000, I think it was 2015, there was a huge ditch repair expense in old MUD 40. And I just think he just raised that for reasons that are unknown to me, because it was not in the merged MUD 1. And they were also concerned the fact that MUD 6 has to reduce its tax rate to meet ours. And I pointed out that that cost is only around $45,000, which is less than the savings that would be realized by doing the consolidation. Neil Gaynor was on the fence and he's the president of MUD 6. He was on the fence for quite some time. He has now changed his position. And I'm pretty certain we have a minimum of 3 votes on MUD 6 to consolidate. Neil was also in the hospital last Friday. He suffered a seizure and was in the hospital for, I believe, at least 2 days, and they couldn't find anything major. He's now back home, so he will be able to participate in the Zoom meeting. So it is certainly the recommendation of the Mud One committee that we approve a consolidation. And I would certainly like to see consensus among the four of us that are attending. I'm sorry that Ken Dorland is absent. And so, Brian, that concludes my comments on item A. So I will make the motion that we approve the consolidation agreement.
This,
Do we
Jeff,
have-
I will second that, Bob. And I have a brief comment.
Okay,
Having looked through extensive documents, I mean, this thing has been studied from one end to the other. This issue really boiled down to one simple thing for me. Is it good public policy? In other words, does it make sense for the public in general for us to do this? And does it serve their needs? I concluded in the end that this is good public policy. It makes sense. And I think we need to be proactive in supporting good public policy, especially in this case when it makes sense. And so therefore, yeah, I second that and I'm going to support it.
and I would also add to that, Jeff, that with all this talk about incorporation and consolidating the MUDs, I think the show initiative among the MUDs to consolidate where it is feasible demonstrates to the residents that we are responsible citizens and are taking positive actions that are in the interest of the residents of the Woodlands. MUD 7 has also paid or almost finished paying off their debt, so they would be a future contender. MUD 36 has also long paid off their debt, but they have extremely low reserves and extremely low tax rates. So that would be a complicating factor in including them in the future, but that's the future. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, Brian?
This is Brian. So Bob, I think on the motions, you want to go ahead and have it cumulative for all action items under item 18 related to consolidation, because the rest of it's just mechanical election items.
Well, I'd like to do
started.
I'd like to do A independently, because if we don't approve A, then items B through D are academic. But we can take B, C, and D as a group, but let's do A first.
And my second will include item A then.
Okay, this is Brian. Any further discussion on 18A? If not, we'll call a roll call vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Walt, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Aye.
Jeff?
Yes.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, 18B through D, as we talked about, these are the items related to actually getting the election machinery in process. It's the order to call your election. The order that we have right now is draft. We're still refining some of the terms, but it does need to be adopted today, because your next board meeting will be after the deadline to call a November election. So we do need action to call on that. Call the election, adopt the election order subject to any necessary revisions that SPH may make to that order in coordination with Montgomery County, and approval of the election service agreement and joint election agreement with Montgomery County. Those are both form documents from Montgomery County because it's a November election. The election must be conducted jointly with the county. The district does not have the discretion to hold an independent election in November, only in May. So the election services agreement sets out all the services that the county will provide in conducting the election. The joint election agreement says that the political subdivision of MUD 1, and then we'll have one also for MUD 6, will be joining in the election with Montgomery County. So do we have a motion to approve items B through D under item 18 on the agenda?
Bob, I will move for approval of item B, C, and D.
I will second that.
Okay, this is Brian. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Stinson, you are on.
Thank you, sir. At the trustee meeting, we, at the request of a MUD 46 director, we talked about the possibility of creating a spot on our residential water bills for customers to donate to a fund that would help folks that were having a problem paying their water bill. City of Houston, this is a popular program with them and other cities. And Brian Yates informed us that he didn't think that that would be an easy task for a MUD district to do. So we've kind of put that on hold for now. I also reported that I had received a request from a MUD 46 resident to take a look at the Ian McCard reports back in the 70s that George Mitchell had requested. And in particular, how they talked about drainage and groundwater issues. And it was suggested that maybe we post that on our website for directors to look at. And so if you haven't looked at those, I think a lot of the information in those reports is kind of timely when it comes to groundwater and drainage. So we encourage you to take a look at those. I think Shelley sent a link out to our directors. We also reported, as Mike mentioned earlier, we're still in discussions with TACUS regarding the invoices that were sent to their 5 prime contractors. One of the prime contractors was offering a lot of resistance and not communicating with us. So TACUS actually paid their bill in full for damages. We're still working with the 4 other primes, and TACUS is applying some pressure to them to work with us on those. So we'll see how that plays out over the next week or so. I did report that HARC has completed their study of and recommendation for additional subsidence monitoring locations throughout Montgomery County. That report is available on their website. They've also got a link to what I think is referred to as a story map or a storybook regarding groundwater issues in Montgomery County and subsidence. So we'll be pushing that out on our social media. We encourage you to take a look at that. That was put together at the request of our groundwater consortium, which is the Woodlands Water Agency, the Woodlands Township, Southern Montgomery County MUD, and WCID number 1. We had a discussion regarding relocating of 2 AMI transmission poles that have caused concern for some residents in the Slash Pine area and near HEB at Woodlands Parkway in Kirkendall. We reported that according to Brian, that cost should be borne by the MUD that the pole is sitting in now. If it's to be relocated, we had a request from Director Scott Haynes and our trustees, Scott Haynes at the meeting. He was the alternate trustee to reconsider that. And so I'll be looking at some options for spreading that expense out over the MUDs and reporting back at the next meeting. I did receive a report that San Jacinto River Authority has selected Half and Associates to perform the additional detention studies on Spring Creek in association with the SGRA Regional Watershed Master Drainage Plan. and half was the lead engineer on that package and that plan studying the watershed. So I think that was probably a good selection for SJRA to utilize half for this additional Spring Creek detention analysis. We did have a meeting with Congressman Brady's office regarding assisting us in guiding us through putting us in a good position to take advantage of any funding that might come out of the American Jobs Plan being promoted by the Biden administration. The meeting, I think, was productive. Brandon Steinman, who's the regional director, offered to contact the Washington, D.C. office and see what kind of help they could provide. We've got kind of what I call a short list of consultants and lobbyists that we'll be interviewing and talking to. And we do have a follow-up meeting with Congressman Brady attending in August. So we'll report how that goes. And that completes my report.
Unrelated question, Jim. Some time ago, I was playing around with the Smart Water page, and it's incredible the amount of information that's available. And it's very informative, and I really enjoyed seeing what's there and the possibilities. Do we have any feedback on whether people are actually utilizing this or looking at it? We get any page counts or hits or anything? Maybe Maureen's got an answer to that.
I do. We have a 24% registration rate, and we have a lot more page visits. And as AMI continues to roll out, I expect that to increase.
Good. So that's a positive report. Great. Yeah. Okay. Any further discussions or questions?
Hey, Bob, this is Jeff. We still have 3 on, so I got a 10 o'clock meeting at my office, and I've got to run over there.
I think we're very close to finishing up.
I've got a question.
Walt?
Jim, I'm moving this poll. Is this just one resident complaining, or is it the neighborhood, or?
Well, over in the Slash Pine area, it is 2 homes that I have met with that I'm aware of. And then on the Lake Woodlands Drive and Kirkendall area, it's also 2 residents that I've met with. Of course, they have indicated that they represent a much larger section of the neighborhood, but there's only 2 in each area that I've actually met with and communicated with.
Okay, but like I had mentioned, I think once before, my knowledge of the covenants and standards, that doesn't violate anything at all.
That is correct. We have we have the right, I guess, to utilize that area for the purpose of a transmission pole. Yes.
Yes, but even if it wasn't a transmission pole, even if it was something else, according to the standards, just the visibility of an object doesn't constitute a violation of the covenants. It's no difference than all the residents that live in Grogan's Mill that can see the old Anadarko towers when they went up. I mean, that's, it's a visibility, but it doesn't mean it devalues your property value at all.
I understand, and they've been placed, and they're not violating any covenant. That's correct.
So I guess my question being the fact that you haven't agreed to spend any money to move poles or anything, correct?
That is correct. If anybody, any MUD or the group decides to move these, it would be just as a courtesy to the adjacent homeowner.
Okay.
Okay. Hartley, anything on the trustees side?
Well, Jim's pretty well covered it, except we had Mr. Yulin come and tell us that we lacked leadership and transparency in public comments. And I wish someone would get to him and show him all of the the public relations efforts we've made, but that's in the summary. And it's interesting that Trustee Kyle May wanted to bring up our ethics policy because he was offended by the remarks of Laura Norton, as quoted in the press. Laura was not present to defend herself. And I think her email has pretty well outlined what her position was. And as a result, there was some discussion about ethics, and they've appointed a committee to review the ethics policy. I'm interested that we're spending a considerable amount of time, staff time, and money on things where we're just trying to please the people who live in the woodlands. The replacement of the pole is one good example. The odor issue on sawdust is just unbelievable, the time and effort that's gone into that, when at no time have we violated the odor standards of the state. And that's about it. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Hartley. Okay, moving, if no further discussion, we'll move on to item 21. Any matters for future agenda?
This is Brian. So back on 17, we did confirm last year that actually the district was determined to be developed district, so the 3.5%, and it's going to be the same this year. So if y'all want to go ahead and take action on 17, we can adopt that resolution and not roll it forward.
Okay, we still have a quorum. So I don't think, I think Jeff would probably vote for it.
I so move.
I'll second. If no
Okay, we have a
further-
motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call the vote. Bob, how do you vote?
Aye.
Walt? Walt, how do you vote?
Aye.
Hartley?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, we won't see that next month. And next month we meet in person. I look forward to seeing everyone to see how much we've all aged and put on weight in the last year. Anything on else on the future agenda? If not, the meeting is adjourned at 9:58.
Bye, all.
Thanks, everyone. See you all next month.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Bob.